Hello, welcome to Modern China Part 2, and today we will talk about the Chinese Civil War and China's fight with Japan. The three dominant cliques of China are Jili, Anhui, and Fengtian. And there was one underdog in the south of China, known as Kuomintang, led by none other than Sun Yat-sen. In 1920, Jili and Fengtian united to attack the Anhui clique, and they were so easy that the war ended in 9 days, lasting from July the 14th to July the 23rd. But let's take a detour on the leaders of the Jili and Fengtian. The leader of the Fengtian clique was Zhang Zhoulin. Zhang Zhoulin was a huge supporter of the Japanese, and it was no secret. His clique was very dependent on the Japanese, which is what made the Fengtian clique the most powerful in the region. In fact, he formed Manchurian gangs and helped Japan during the Russo-Japanese War. Now let's move on to Wu Peifu, the leader of the Jili clique. He began to grow cautious of the Fengtian clique. Not only are they the strongest power in the region, but they also have an alliance with Japan, which is a hated power in all of China. So as tensions grew between each other, he denounced the Fengtian clique for siding with Japan. Now since we're on the topic of alliances, I think it is time to mention the allies of the other Chinas. The Kuomintang's ally was actually strangely the USSR, even though the Kuomintang had communist supporters that were suppressed. And Jili's ally was Italy, a new fascist power out of Europe. European mercenaries were actually very common, with very interesting stories, such as Sun Yat-sen's bodyguard known as Abraham Two-Armed Cohen, who was a Polish-born British and Canadian adventurer of Jewish origin, who not only was a bodyguard, but a very important general in the army. Then there was Frank One-Armed Sutton, who was Sun Yat-sen's second bodyguard. He has earned the nickname One-Armed because he lost his arm. But he was not just a bodyguard. He had many hustles during his lifetime, which included being a general for Zhang Zhoulin, selling mortars illegally to Chinese overlords, mining gold in Serbia, and also building railways in the countries of Argentina and Mexico. The uneasy alliance between the Jili and Fengtian wouldn't last long, ending on April 10th of 1922, when the first Jili-Fengtian War started with the Kuomintang and Anhui joining on the side of Fengtian. But the war ended after 2 months, which made Jili occupy Beijing, with the Jili casualties being so low that there aren't even any specific casualties for the war compared to Fengtian's 20,000 casualties, 10,000 desertion, and 40,000 surrender. Even though Jili had 20,000 troops less and fighting against their friends. But while the Jili clique celebrated the taking of the Fengtian's capital, Zhang started a huge military reform and scheming for his revenge, which made the generals more powerful, unlike before, where they were literally gang leaders. While it may have looked that the Jili clique was high and mighty, it was a very unstable clique with people like Feng Yuxiang and Cao Kun just waiting for the right moment. But then the second Jili-Fengtian War broke out, but the Jili clique was fighting on two fronts. Not only were they fighting against the Fengtian faction, who had 50,000 more men in strength, but also they had to fight against Feng Yuxiang, who started the Beijing coup, which started on October of 1924. This gave an overwhelming advantage to Zhang Zhoulin and a looming end to the Jili clique. As the Jili clique lost the war, which ended this clique, this is known as the most important war in the Chinese warlord era. But as the Fengtian clique was celebrating their win against the Jili clique, Sun Yat-sen, the leader of Kuomintang, used something none of the leaders actually had, which is stability. No one, and I mean no one, liked the warlord system, not even the leaders of the cliques themselves, who wanted to unite China. But while every other warlord never really cared about this fact, Sun Yat-sen manipulated this fact and used this to have an infinite stability glitch. Not for long though. Stability allowed the clique to last long, unlike the others, which ended them. So Sun Yat-sen, who was an important figure in the previous Chinese Republic in 1918, which we talked about in the last episode, he said that he will remake this republic and unite China, which made him a huge competitor in the region. Another important individual for the Kuomintang was Chiang Kai-shek, or, let's be real, his name is Shrek. who was one of the greatest generals of the Kuomintang and supported the National Revolution, which is one of the Kuomintang's greatest armies. They started an operation on the rebels of the Jili clique, which triggered a war against the Fengtian clique. As the Fengtian clique came later, the Kuomintang had an advantage, and they won, taking all of the Jili territory from the Fengtian clique. But the Kuomintang alliance with the USSR started to break down, and the same came to the CCP. But the Kuomintang was not the only warlord nation to lose an alliance. The Fengtian clique had encountered with Japan, which started a battle, which lowered relations dramatically. So they supposedly assassinated Zhang Zhou-lin, so his heir united with the Kuomintang, which ended the Chinese warlord period in the December of 1928. Now let's go forward 3 years, 9 years. The Second Sino-Japanese War is highly debated on the date of the war. Some historians believe it was when Japan entered Manchuria, but others believe it started during the Marco Polo Bridge incident in 1937. But most historians believe it started in 1937, so we will stick to this date in this video. Also, this is very interesting, but Nazi Germany actually supported China. Yeah, and they never actually officially supported Japan. But the Axis was a very weird alliance in general, which we will discuss in a video soon. But after the attack on Pearl Harbor and the attack on Malay, the war officially merged with World War II. Some scholars even believe the Second Sino-Japanese War to be the start of World War II. The war started because Japan wanted more resources, and apparently they are a competition in the textile industry. But we all know that's cap, and they just hate China and want more land. The invasion of Manchuria gave them Manchukuo, which was a puppet state, and allowed them to attack the Chinese from more fronts. The Chinese had something Japan didn't, and that's manpower. China had, and still has, for now, the highest population in the world. After the Marco Polo Bridge incident, Japan swiftly took the cities of Beijing, Shanghai, and Nanjing. This is also when the massacre of Nanjing happened. The casualties of this incident is very debated. In fact, there are whole articles and pages on the casualties of this tragic incident. China then got a huge ally, the USSR. They signed a pact which gave a huge advantage to them. But after China's victory in Changsha and Guangxi, the front didn't change. That doesn't mean the war is over. China still has two other important allies, which are the CCP and America. The CCP started communist rebellions in Shanxi and Nanning, which really exhausted the Japanese forces. But the CCP also launched a huge counteroffensive in Central Asia, which was highly aggressive and successful, counting to 50,000 casualties on the side of the Japanese. Their motto is 3 alls, known as kill all, burn all, and destroy all. In fact, it was so aggressive, Mao never launched a guerrilla campaign again. But that doesn't mean the National Revolutionary Army and the CCP were friends, which isn't really surprising if you know anything about the political compass. They frequently abandoned each other in multiple battles and obviously didn't agree on many things. Now let's move on to China's second ally, America. America increased its aid to China to $20 billion in modern day after the Pearl Harbor attack. They also had super cool and epic mercenaries known as the Flying Tigers, which is actually very useful since China didn't have airplanes as their own at the time. In fact, their whole air force was filled with American and Soviet models, except for the Chu XB-0. The Japanese lost after the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which ended its war with Japan, or the Asian Holocaust, with 10 to 20 million casualties and a whopping 80 to 100 million refugees. Thank you for watching, and in the next video, I will finish off this 3-part series of modern China with a talk about the CCP, the Great Leap, and much more.